I got kind of an interesting one here. So this is a, I don't know, I think a 2002 Honda Odyssey or something. So the original complaint was that the fuel gauge is not moving, and the low fuel light comes on. So the fuel gauge stays right here no matter how much they drive it. They're sure there's not that much gas in it, but it just stays there, and then the low fuel light is staying on. And they had it scanned at AutoZone, and they got a bunch of codes about a secondary oxygen sensor, post-cat, which is not a big deal for drivability. That's just an emissions checking sensor. But now this has sat here for a few days till I've had a chance to look at it. And it had an extremely long crank. But now she starts up and she starts to run. And she just dies. And if I hit the gas, she dies right away. I'm just going to go off of a guess here that this is all related back to the fuel pump. I think there is the low fuel light on these operates on one circuit, the fuel gauge operates on another circuit, and then you have power going to the fuel pump. I want to say that the sensor side of that has one ground and the fuel pump has another ground, but I'm not sure. So I'm just thinking we probably have a bad ground at the fuel pump, because it wasn't doing that before. I haven't even plugged the scan tool into this thing yet to see what all codes it's got. But either that or it has actually started to run out of fuel, because that fuel gauge isn't working. So let's tear out the back seats and get to the fuel pump and check out the wiring back there. All right, folks. So we got this figured out here, I think. So basically, you pull out these the front row back seats. There's a metal plate that you take off, and you can get down here and you can pull this connector out. So this connector has 4 wires. I think the older ones had 5, and there was a separate circuit for the low fuel light that ran back to the fuel pump, or maybe it's the newer ones or something, I don't know. But basically you got these 2 black wires that should be grounds. You've got this wire for the gauge, and this wire is power to the fuel pump, which will only provide power when it's cranking. So I've got my test light set up here, and we'll go ahead and test those 2 grounds first, because that's easy. So I'll hook up to my battery positive here with my test light right there, and we'll come back here and we'll test these 2 grounds. And basically I'm trying to do this holding my phone, which isn't the funnest thing. So those 2 are over there. So we just come down here and hook our back probe up. You see our test lights. When we hook our back probe up to this one, you see our test lights. We have a good ground. So now we want to check the positive to the fuel pump. And I'm pretty sure that's this wire because it's the thicker one. And so what we want is this one right here where my thumb is. We're going to check that and see if that is providing power. And I'm just front probing this because there's plenty of room for this to fit down in there. And then we'll stick that over here where we can see it while we're cranking, and then we'll go crank the car and see if it'll run or if it will turn on that light. So we're gonna crank it. See if I can get you guys a view of the light here. There you go. Well, that didn't work. Hang on. Let me make sure I'm on it. Give me a second to get into this connector again. Oh, you know what I gotta do? I gotta switch the test light over to ground from positive. Okay. Now let's crank it and see if that guy lights up. And it does. So that tells us the fuel pump relay is working, it's getting power and everything. So now what we're gonna do is go back to ground here, because the fuel pump, the control circuit puts out a power, and by how much it pulls it to ground, we are in ground, by how much it pulls it to ground is how it determines what the fuel level is. So what we're gonna do is probe into that. So give me a second here and let me probe into that one. Okay, I'm probed into that fuel pump control with the ground, and we'll be like, man, the fuel gauge isn't working. That should send it to full, right? So it's still half empty, and you're like, what's going on? Well, the computer doesn't change it right away, but you can recycle the key and it will change it. And you see the low fuel light went out and it went to full, went over full, yeah, straight up. But we unhook this from the ground and we cycle the key again, and it should be empty now. Oh, come on, key. Yeah. The low fuel light's on and it's at half. That gauge is wrong. That gauge is bad. So half is empty. And the low fuel light's on because the computer sees that signal and says that's low fuel. But the gauge is mechanically incorrect. So the fuel gauge is a lying piece of trash. I think the fuel pump is fine. We'll have to see. But I think I bet you the float's working fine. I bet you just the fuel gauge is off. So what I'm going to do is pop that instrument cluster out real quick. Pop the cover off of it. And take a look and see if we move that back to E, which should now be on empty. Everything's disconnected. Let's disconnect that. Right, and that should read empty. So we'll move that back to E, and then we'll put some gas in it and see if it starts and it runs. It's okay. Interesting. I guess the rule there is don't always trust your fuel gauge. Trust your low fuel light, especially on a Honda. Okay, so now I adjusted this, and this is with it grounded, so it's all the way full. And now I'll disconnect my ground to it and cycle the key. And it comes back to all the way empty. So hopefully that will fix it. If it doesn't, then the gauge is off. So now I gotta pull that cluster back out and put this plastic cover back on the front of it and put all this dashboard back together. And we'll put a couple gallons of gas in it and put the seats back in and all that, and then it'll be good to go. All right, I got all the seats and carpet and everything put back in. So now we're ready to put some gas in it and try to start it and see what happens. So here's the big moment of truth. I put 5 gallons of gas in it. We're gonna see if it starts. We're gonna see what the fuel gauge says. It's a little under 1/4 of a tank. That's about where it should be for 5 gallons. Plus, I probably spilled a little bit on the ground, so probably, you know. But we'll start it. Start right up. Let's see if I can hit the gas. Yep, it's fine. And it still says low fuel because the fuel's low. But once that gets up a little higher, that low fuel light will go out. You know, that's as good as I can do for right now. And just have to see, you know, to see what happens. You know, if that instrument cluster starts acting goofy again. But hopefully not. Hopefully that'll just fix it, and this old girl will be good to go for a while. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to get an instrument cluster out of the junkyard for it. But anyway, just an interesting one. You know, sometimes it's as simple as a malfunctioning gauge, and it actually is running out of gas. You know, I'll talk to y'all later. This is Tom, the Frugal Prepper.